Levar Stoney. I'm the mayor of Richmond. During the monument removal, I was the individual who directed the administration to remove the monuments. It was, I guess, some idea that we moved forward with under my time. Well, we'll have to go way back a little bit. In 20, I believe it was 2018, I initiated the Monument Avenue Commission to review and discuss whether or not we should contextualize the monuments. And right in the middle of our work, the Unite the Right rally occurred in Charlottesville. And that is when I made a decision to put removal of the monuments on the table. The discussion itself brought people out from all corners of Virginia, out of the countryside, folks from South Side, folks came out of North Carolina, because although this was a city of Richmond decision, I think people had an attachment to those monuments. And so it began back then. The commission came back with a report that stated they wanted to see Jefferson Davis's monument removed. They wanted, we did not have the power, the authority to remove monuments. Remember, there was a law in the books that stated that localities did not have the ability to remove monuments or war memorials. But come July 1, 2020, we gained that power because of the General Assembly. And that's when the month prior, I told my team that we should move forward with removal. For me, I'll admit, I moved to Richmond. I understood what the Confederacy was. You don't think about it. You just say, oh, we know what that is, right? Coming from a black man's perspective, you're like, you know exactly what that is. My friends who moved to Richmond were like, Monument Avenue is known to us as Losers Row. But people say, well, did you ever visit the monuments before? I ran the Monument 10K. I would go to Easter on Parade, pay no attention to those monuments. I'd never been to the actual circle before, like looked at it straightforward. But on June 2nd, I believe, I marched with protesters. This is after the murder of George Floyd. I marched from Capitol Square to Monument Avenue. And that was the first time I've ever been up close and personal with the Robert E. Lee Monument. After marching there and marching back, or getting back to home, it was a long day, because earlier in that day I had gone on the front steps of City Hall and spoke to protesters after police officers had tear gassed people at that monument. And this is when we made the decision we were going to remove those monuments. But then also, this is when my chief of staff at the time, Lincoln Saunders, said, we don't have to wait until, the General Assembly or to the City Council to actually. There are people who are telling us that we could just remove them, right there on July 1. And so my obligation and motivation was, number one, to right a wrong. Number two, public safety as well. We saw in Portsmouth, a couple of individuals tried to pull down the monument in Town Square in Portsmouth. They ended up in the ICU because of it. And we had already seen people remove monuments already by taking a truck or pulling it down. But when you're dealing with the monuments on Monument Avenue, this is a totally different ballgame of monuments. We're talking about tonnage, okay? And so I didn't want what happened in Portsmouth to happen in Richmond. People getting maimed, injured, potentially there could be a fatal incident as well. And so I used my public safety powers to direct the removal of those monuments. So that was my motivation, and that was my obligation. there's a story. I have a story that I like to tell, and it's about I went to Geneva, Switzerland, on behalf of the city because it was the passing of the baton for the minuet competition. It was a competition of amateur violinists from around the world, and it was going to go from Geneva to Richmond the next year. And I was there to receive the baton, I guess you can say, right? And when I'm there, they do a video of Richmond, the next stop of the minuet competition. And guess what they started with in that video? Monument Avenue. And I remember Betty Crutcher, who was the first lady of University of Richmond, was sitting next to me. She's like, why did they have to start with the monuments? Now, this is the person who moved to Richmond, but she grew up and had a relationship with Tuskegee. And she was like, why are we leading with that? And that's a really good question. But when we did these sort of economic missions or any sort of mission trip, that's what we led with. Look at Monument Avenue. I think I even participated in a C-SPAN interview one time, and they wanted to check out Monument Avenue. And so we were defined by those 4 years in American history, right? Richmond's been around a very, very long time, but 4 years defined Richmond, 1861 to 1865. And after the South put down their arms, we leaned into the fact that we were the capital of the Confederacy. And what that meant to, for some, it was a part of their pride and those who fought for the Confederacy. But for many, we all know that it was racism. Now, from the black man's perspective, when those monuments were erected, they were there to send a message. And although the North may have won, that this is ours. And that was never lost on me. Those monuments were to send a message to young black kids, be like, if we had our way, you wouldn't be able to read, you wouldn't be able to go to school, you wouldn't be able to be the mayor. And so, to me, for years, we were just caught in those 4 years, right? We talk about the lost cause a lot. This was the fake news of their time. To spin another story about how great and grand these individuals were. But as I said, if these individuals got their way, I would still be in bondage, you would be in bondage, So I think there was a lot of, for some people it was a sense of pride. For some people I would say it also meant white supremacy as well. And for African Americans in town, I think this is just the way it is. Now, I had a lot of people who told me, you should just ignore that. Don't do anything about it. Just ignore it. I'm not going to name any names. I had elected officials, black elected officials said, why are you going over here and bothering with their stuff? This is not in our neighborhood. Why are you bothering with it? We have worked for years to create good relationships with the black and white community. And why are you over here now digging this stuff up? And I was like, digging this stuff up? I'm just trying to do what's right. But these are, people who I would consider my allies, my friends. They were Richmonders too. Remember, I'm not from Richmond. And so they had lived with, this is just how things are. And they don't bother us, so they shouldn't bother you. But I believe being a person in public office, it's not just about the here and now, it's about the future. And so do I want my daughter, who was born in Richmond, to live in a city that's celebrating these Confederate monuments? That's the story. That's the answer, the question we have to answer. And I'm glad that we answered it the right way by removing those monuments. They can be celebrated. They can be celebrated, educated in libraries and museums. They don't have to be on grand boulevards or in your parks. Going to city council, we had a majority of votes on city council. We were going to go through the regular process, put it, I was going to likely sponsor a piece of legislation for removal, get to city council, put it before the city council, let them debate it. They sign off. We we procure the contractors, the crane, to go get them, and that's the way we were going to do it. So in Richmond, during the state of emergency, which was the unrest, and then we had COVID-19 as well. So there was a number of state of emergencies that the state and us had agreed to. During an emergency, I'm the public safety director. And during an emergency, here's the thing, we had, so folks don't know this, I think we had asked for the state to extend the emergency longer. We were thinking, because under emergency, I'm the director of public safety, and I can do things, I have more powers during that moment. And I could direct, you don't have to do the same procurement process as you use on it every day, on your current day-to-day, but in an emergency, you can bypass some of that. We were thinking. And that allowed me to make certain decisions, with the reasoning being because we're in a state of emergency. And I could declare that the monuments were a public health and safety risk to people, which they were. Racism is bad for your health. So yeah, that was our basis, our legal basis, which is held up in court on many occasions now. And so it worked. We took full advantage of the moment. Let's just say that. But what folks also don't recognize is that the removal served as a way to de-escalate as well. So there were people who were pissed off that I removed the monuments, right? Beautiful pieces of art, all this stuff. But they did not recognize that our removal strategy was also part of de-escalating the climate at the time as well. Remember, these were hot days after the murder of George Floyd. We had to find ways to de-escalate. This was one of the ways. This was one of the ways, and also people going back to work was another way as well. The lifting of some of the measures, the COVID-19 measures, combining those things allowed for us to de-escalate the situation. And let me tell you about the Marvin L Commission as well. So people don't know this. In Virginia, and many places in the South, people celebrate Confederate History Month, or there's a month to the Confederacy. And I was going to announce this commission. The day I was going to announce the commission was the same day that Mitch Landrieu, the mayor of New Orleans, spoke up and told New Orleans, the people of New Orleans, he was taking down monuments in New Orleans. And so I said, man, we would have been lost in the news that day if we would have moved forward with that. So the commission started the work, okay? And then after the commission came out with a report, basically the report said, you guys don't have the ability to take down the monument, so thank you for the exercise, right? The General Assembly, the Democrats had the governorship, and they had the House and the Senate, gave us the ability to do so. And so we had already stated that we were going to do this. Then 2020 happened, the pandemic, and then social unrest after the murder of George Floyd. There was days of unrest. Remember, a bus was torched. It was a bad couple days, right, for the city. June 1 comes, and that's when the tear gassing happened. I go to social media and say, I will apologize for what occurred to you personally. June 2nd comes. I arrive at City Hall. I see nobody there. I'm like, I assume the people are going to be coming. Well, they came. They came. And we made a decision. They're like, do you want to do a microphone audio? And I was like, nah, there's not going to be that many people. I'll just do the megaphone, I was wrong. I was very wrong. And I get out there. I apologize. I walk to the monument. I march to the monument with protesters that day. That evening, we go back to where I live, which was downtown at Millen Roads. I have my team with me, Lincoln Saunders, I think Maggie Anderson, who's my chief of staff now, a couple other people. I do an interview with some pastors that evening as well. But that's when we start working on what our move was going to be. Like I said, Lincoln Saunders said, we don't have to necessarily wait till July 1. We can maybe do this now. The reason we got that was because it was the governor's general counsel who said, I think you guys might be able to do this without city council's, say so. And we're like, we're all ears, we're listening. I gave Lincoln the go-ahead to pursue the removal. We had not spoken to anyone on city council about this, but I said, go ahead and pursue it. Once legally we felt like we were on solid ground, we started to work towards finding someone to do it. Devon Henry was already working with the Commonwealth on this matter. Let me back up a little bit. We were going to release a statement. We did release a statement. I think the day after, I can't get the dates right. A long statement about the things we were going to do moving forward, focus on equity, right? And I guess we buried the lead a little bit. The last thing we said we were going to do was, oh yeah, we're going to remove the monuments as well. I think people went right through the press release and went, wait a minute, they're going to remove the monuments. And there's some back and forth because Governor Northam also was going to do the same thing. So we were both going to do this. There was some back and forth on who was going to say it first. Northam invites me to a press conference. I'm standing there, he's there, and that's when I said it was time to remove the monuments. So we now are all on the same page. Remember, Governor Northam started, the Commonwealth started exploring Robert E. Lee, and that's when someone filed an injunction and stopped that work. Because I think they were going to go way before we were. Which I was like, well, it gives us some cover. That's what you want, right? We want to have political cover. Someone does it first. It starts the process. His whole thing stops. The guy they were working with was Devon Henry, Team Henry. And, as I directed Lincoln to start looking for contractors, people we normally work with to do this sort of work, all said, hell no. We got far with someone and someone said, hey man, we can't do it. My father said he would write me out of the will if I moved forward with this. So every contractor in Central Virginia and Virginia said no. But one person said yes, and was willing to work with us, and that was Devon Henry. Devon, who I've known for a very long time, for probably 5 or so years by that time, has a family and whatnot. He said he had a family, he had a business, and that's why he thought it'd be best if he goes under a different LLC to protect his family, which I was okay with. What was it, John Mitchell, who said that black men put this monument up and black men will be the ones to take it down? Well, that came to pass. Mr. Mitchell was right. Um, I think it says a lot about, we came full circle, right? And it's somewhat poetic, I think, that it was a black man there were black men who put those monuments up, and there was a black man and his team that took them down. I think that's poetic. I think it was the right way to do it. I remember I was running for re-election at the time. And one of my opponents attacked me before Devon Henry doing that. And I defended Devon Henry because he put his business, his family, and his life all on the line. And you don't see courage like that every day. You don't see courage like that every day. And for someone to use him as a political pawn, essentially, to politicize it and say that, number one, we broke the law. Number two, we tried to give him a sweetheart deal. It could be further from the truth. Furthest from the truth. When you put all the danger he put himself in, we probably didn't pay him enough. As we are strategizing on how to do this, a couple of problems start to arise. Number one, so we checked off, we found a contractor, right? Number two, security. Now, we could do this in the middle of the night, like some people have done. Baltimore, I think, did something like that once. I think New Orleans did it a couple times. But I thought doing it in the middle of the night would have been somewhat cowardly, I think. I think this is something that needed to be done in the sunshine, right? But safety was always a concern. The police department, our reading of the law was that this was something we could do with our emergency powers. But the general counsel at the police department did not agree with our interpretation. And then the city attorney, who was not the attorney general, by the way, just a person who was providing legal advice to the city, also believed that our interpretation was incorrect. So now we have the city attorney and the general counsel to the police department saying it's incorrect. And then I had fired the chief, so we had an interim chief at the time. And this chief, with the general counsel, was sitting in my room, my office, and they're like, we're not going to be able to tell the police department to do this. And that's a slap in the face, right? Because basically they're saying you can't command the department to do something that breaks the law. And if the city attorney is saying it as well, I'm outnumbered, essentially. So I was like, we're going to have to solve this public safety issue. So the department's out. And Devon Henry had started working with them on like public safety plans. You got the feeling they didn't want to do it. It's pretty clear, right? And they weren't going to do me any favors as well, as you can imagine, at that point in time. We considered doing RMC, right? The folks with the yellow vests. We considered other security options as well. And I was like, well, maybe we'll ask the sheriff to do it. So I called the sheriff, and the sheriff said, I'm good with it if the city council's good with it. So then I worked the phones and I started calling every city council person. And I said, hey, we got the people to do this. All we need is public safety cover. But also the sheriff wants you all to have her back as well. You guys were with me. Yeah, we're with you. I called all 9 of them. So, come July 1, the night before June 30th, I could not sleep. I was just kind of giddy, kind of scared as well, because you just, remember, we're in the middle of all this activity, and you just don't know what's going to happen, right? Oh, by the way, before I was going to do all this, people like Betty Burrell, people in procurement, they were like, man, I don't know how you can do this. We don't want you to end up in an orange jumpsuit. And there were some people who were like, do it. Because there was going back and forth about who can procure this. If Some people didn't want to sign off on it. Here's the thing. I love the folks who I get to work with, but they were like, if the city attorney is also saying you can't do this, and you have outside attorneys who say you can, so I had to find attorneys who said I could. Greg Werkheiser, Jeff Bright from Hampton Roads, Greg Werkheiser, who lives here in Richmond, they gave me an opinion that said, no, looking at the law, you can do this. So I had a conflicting opinion, but from external attorneys. So I'm rolling with them. Right. I called Mark Herring, the Attorney General. He wouldn't return my call. I called around to everyone. I called Mike Herring. I called Colette McKeechin. I said, Colette, can I do this before July 1? And she said, you could do it, but I think you probably should wait till July 1. You have the emergency. You could, if I were you, I'd wait until July 1. Because I was ready to go a week before July 1. I had the contractors from Connecticut and the crane operators already here in Richmond for almost a week, waiting around, and Devon Henry's over here trying to keep them entertained. And they're getting restless. They're away from their families. They're like, what is going on here? Are you guys going to do this or not? Still had to solve this public safety issue. So I called our city council, and I said, you know what, we're going to do a special meeting on July 1, because I want you guys to get involved in this as well. Now, did I need them? No. Would it have been good to have all 9 support the mayor to do this? Yes. And remember, I already phone called every one of them, and they were like, yeah, let's do it. We get on a Zoom, a virtual meeting, everybody gets cold feet. And just leave me hanging. I was like, wow. It was like, and I remember Councilman Jones, Delegate Jones now, was like, well, if you think you can do it, then just do it. And I was like, well, why don't can I just get a yes vote? I'm asking you all to support me in doing this. And they're like, well, if you can do it, just do it. Once again, this can kicking, you know? So basically, we did not get their sign off, I guess you could say. So I remember moving out of I had my suit on and everything in the virtual meeting. My team was behind me. The team of attorneys from external attorneys were with me in the office. I get up, I turn around, and they were like, what the hell? And I was like, yeah. I said, we're still doing this. I phone. So they're at the wastewater treatment plant, staged. Devon Henry, the crane operators, the sheriff's office. They're watching the meeting virtually as well. And when the city council said no, or they chose not to act, that really took Sheriff Irving from here to like, oh, then we're out. Then we're out. So I called Sheriff Irving, who's there at the site. And Devon Henry was like, call her. And I was like, Sheriff, she's like, if you can get me a letter that gives me some immunity, gives me some protection, I'll move forward. I get her on the phone with my attorneys, Greg Werkheiser, Jeff Bright. They call her and they're like, what do you need? She said, if you can put it in writing, I'm ready to go. They type it up, draw it up right there on the spot in the office. We email it to her. She gets it on her phone. And I'm not there, right? Devon says, when she saw it on her phone, she read it. She gave it to her person. They read it. She turned around and she said, let's go. And the truck started to roll down Arthur Ashe Boulevard to the Stonewall Jackson Monument. They moved me out of City Hall to a safe house. So I'm not served an injunction. So I go to a home of, what's her name? She just passed away. On West Ave, Stuart Gamage. I get out, and I'm like, all right, it should be happening any time now, right? So I'm on West Ave watching this, and then every news station goes live. Every news station goes live. And I'm watching, like with bated breath, just like, come on. Because remember, there was no time to even explore where the bolts were or anything like that. They had no time to do any of that type of homework. So this is all, they're going into this blind. And I see the radar as well. The storm is coming. And I'm just like, God. And I kept on calling Devon. I was like, where are we? Where are we? Where are we? And he basically stopped answering my calls because he said I was bothering him. He had work to do. I was like, man, the storm is coming. Like, you guys are going to have to cease to work, you know. But they kept on going. And when I saw movement, I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe it. Couldn't believe it. I'm a little emotional about it. It was some sleepless nights to get there. But we got there. And I always say that I don't want to be known as the person who removed the monuments, you know. But, you know, sometimes you don't get to choose the moments choose you. And I'm glad when the time came, we did the right thing. Yeah, I kind of laid that out already, huh? Yeah. Can I say though, the difficulties? I hate people who tell me or tell others they can't do something. Right? I hate that word. I hate can't. And we faced a lot of can't. A lot of people were like, you can't do that, you can't do that, you can't do that. But you know, we defied the odds and we did it. And so I always think, you know, things could have really gone left. Right? Things could have really gone sideways if people weren't supportive of me, I think. Right? You could have had someone on the part of my leadership team defect, possibly, right? Someone said, oh, I'm going to go to the press, I'm going to leak something. All these things could have happened because you're depending on people all the way along the way, this chain, right? And the only thing that occurred was a city council person had me investigated. The state police investigated me and my team. Special counsel was appointed and found no wrongdoing. So, I faced difficulties before and after. Which tells you we must have done something pretty big. Yeah. Think about the people, the crane operators out of Connecticut. They were harassed, doxxed, and almost didn't want to come back down and finish the job because of what occurred. I know I'm skipping on to another question probably, but the number of threatening phone calls that I got to my office, to me, people who got my cell phone and called me and threatened me, racist, like you never heard it before. Like, you know, it's the chef's kiss type racism. Like, oh my gosh, that's how bad it was. And you know, still worth it. Still worth it. Luckily, no one was killed. No one was injured. In other places, you know, in other times, it could have been detrimental to your health. Community involvement was a part of this from the very beginning, and I mean the very beginning, from the time they were erected. Right? There was community back then that was like, this is wrong, but they couldn't do anything about it. Right? Fast forward to the community, and I remember bringing Mitch Landrieu to town. And Mitch Landrieu explained to a crowd over the Virginia, what's it called, the History and Culture Museum. And he told them about how many times, you know, people just left him hanging, basically. Right? Folks left him hanging. Folks would not return his phone calls. He said it was a lonely place after I took those monuments down in New Orleans. And he said to the crowd, the audience at the Virginia History and Culture Museum, if he does this, y'all have to have his back. And I will say, the community had my back. And there are obviously some naysayers, because it's a polarizing experience, right? There's some people who believe it should never have been removed, and some people that should believe that it should never have been erected, right? And as you can imagine, for those who never thought they should be removed, they're not big fans of mine any longer. It's a polarizing experience. And so I'm grateful for the community that had my back, the community who called it out, the community that, that put shined a bright light on those monuments. And I will have to say, those monuments, during my time, we not only saw them removed, we saw them recontextualized as well. If you look at how the community recontextualized them, whether it was Robert E. Lee or all the other ones, they were put into great context. So we saw recontextualization and we saw removal. We were able to accomplish all of those things in a matter of one summer. I think there was a time where I think people thought, yeah, they're wrong, but they serve a purpose. But I don't believe that. I don't believe those monuments served a purpose, because symbolism does matter, and it says a lot about your community and the people of your community. Those symbols do. And I think moving forward, I know there's no man or woman that's perfect, but we have spaces today in Richmond where we celebrate people who put their lives on the line, people who have done extraordinary, exceptional things, people like Maggie Walker, right? And there are people in Richmond's history, Virginia's history, Richmonders who have been extraordinary, like Oliver Hill, Governor Wilder. We need to do more to celebrate that exceptionalism, that excellence that we have in this city. And sometimes you can do that with monuments, and sometimes you can do it, by renaming a street or naming facilities after these heroes. I think that's very important. Also, I must say, I think it's important as well that we mark these moments as well. I think there's a way for us one day to get to a point to highlight the fact that this happened in 2020, right? This is where it occurred. People I know were like, oh, we should have more monuments on Monument Avenue. And maybe Richmond will have more monuments on Monument Avenue. But I also know that Monument Avenue is one of the most expensive addresses in the city of Richmond. And I don't believe that the city should be making investments with the taxpayer dollars on one of the most expensive streets in the city. And so rightfully, we're making investments in Shockoe Bottom to tell the story of slavery, tell the story of the enslaved. And I think that's the right course for the city at the moment. I know there are some residents who live on Monument Avenue today who are saying, oh, he just left us high and dry, and all we have is this plantings, landscaping. But you go to Zillow and check how much those houses go for. And you tell me whether or not you think we need to invest a couple more $1 million on Monument Avenue. Just saying. I got nothing against my friends on Monument Avenue, but come on. I imagine this interview will play one day in the future. At the end of the day, me and others involved, take my title out of this. This is done by just people, right? People with good hearts, very intelligent people who were able to craft a strategy to lead us to this as well. I think the future will be grateful for the acts of these people who were involved in the removal of the monuments. It's one of those things where it's hard to. Sometimes I'm like, I do a lot of these interviews, right? And it seems like so long ago, but I guess it was not very long ago, right? It was 4 years ago, and those monuments stood for 100 years. So I won't be around 100 years from now, but it's my hope that my grandkids can look back at this and see that, you know what, we did something to change the course of Richmond. I think putting Richmond on a different trajectory. So it's my hope that, and I hope that my grandkids, great-grandkids, and their friends are grateful for a city that didn't miss this moment, right? We didn't miss the moment. Sometimes, some places do. We didn't miss the moment.